Independence. With a population of around 125,000, this is the fifth largest city in the state of Missouri, USA. It is known to have produced its fair share of notable citizens, such as Chris Pittman, keyboardist of the legendary Guns N' Roses, Paul Henning, creator of the infamous television series The Beverly Hillbillies, and of course Harry S. Truman, the 33rd President of the United States of America. Independence has its very own tales of paranormal activity, and today we're taking a look at a couple of the apparent most haunted locations. If you enjoyed today's content, please hit like, subscribe, and share amongst your friends and family. Would you like to hear stories from your own city, state, or country? Let me know below in the comment section. You're listening to Phil of A Haunting Tale, and welcome to today's video. Missouri, the hauntings of Independence. Our first tale today, footsteps in the Vaile Mansion. The construction of the mansion began in 1871, and upon its completion 10 years later, in 1881, it consisted of 31 separate rooms, a 48,000-gallon wine cellar, and almost 10 marble fireplaces. It was built as a home and named after one Colonel Harvey Merrick Vaile, along with his wife, Sophia. The Colonel was born on the 23rd of January 1831 in Bennington, Bennington County, Vermont, USA, some 1,200 miles away from Missouri. He attended the University of Louisville, from which he graduated with a law degree before later moving to Kansas City in 1859. He was eventually settled at Independence by 1870. Vaile had a passion for politics and was one of the founders of the Republican Party in Jackson County. He invested in several businesses during his time here and became a part owner of Star Mail Routes, which would later become known for its scandal. It was during this scandal that Colonel Vaile would be arrested and charged with defrauding the government. He would face two separate trials, one in 1882 and the second just a year later in 1883. Both trials ended in a not guilty verdict, but it would seem that the damage had already been done. Aside from having his reputation tarnished, the trials would set Colonel Vaile back an incredible sum of over $100,000 in expenses. To put that into a more recent perspective, in the late 1800s, $100,000 today is the equivalent of around $3 million. This entire situation would put a strain on the Vaile household. The Colonel would become somewhat unhinged and began acting in a strange manner, many believing he was beginning to lose his mind. His wife, Sophia, mortified over the accusations, also suffered. She would fall into a deep depression. Suffering physically as well as mentally, Sophia would seek medical advice. Tragedy struck when she was diagnosed by a professional as having a stomach cancer. It all became too much for Sophia, who proceeded to take an overdose of morphine while her husband was on a business trip in Washington, D.C. She would succumb to the morphine and had passed away in 1891. Colonel Vaile continued to stay at the mansion. His eccentric behaviour would carry on. Legend tells that he could not bear to be departed from his wife and had buried her on the estate in a glass-topped coffin, just so he could continue to see her face. Eventually, his neighbouring community would protest that Sophia deserved a proper burial, to which he finally agreed. Colonel Vaile passed away in 1894 at the age of 63. His remains buried at the Woodlawn Cemetery. Following his death, with the mansion now unoccupied, a court battle ensued over the estate, lasting around 5 years. Finally, after a sale, the mansion was converted into an inn, then later a private asylum and sanitarium. In the years to follow, it would become the operations centre for a mineral water company, before being turned into a rest home. During the 1960s, the Vaile Mansion was purchased by a couple named Roger and Mary DeWitt, who saved the structure from being demolished. Reports of ghostly sightings have come in over the years, many claiming to hear footsteps coming from a room where nobody was present. Passers-by would claim to see silhouettes in the windows of the property during times when there was no inhabitants. People would choose to cross the street rather than walk directly in front of the building. Many think the spirit to be that of Sophia Vaile, who still roams the mansion because her soul wasn't laid to rest immediately. There is an unconfirmed story in which a team of ghost hunters explored the property. Something happened during their time there which caused them all to flee in terror. None of that team wish to speak of the events, even to this day. As it stands currently, the Vaile Mansion is a tourist attraction owned by the Vaile Victorian Society. On to our second story, The Man in Blue. The Jackson County Jail and Marshal's House was constructed in 1859 and consisted of 12 prison cells made of limestone, 6 on the first floor and the other 6 below, located to the rear of the building. A single kerosene lantern provided minimal light for each area, leaving many of the inmates shrouded in almost complete darkness during nightfall. On top of this, there was no form of a heat source to be found. The building stood as an outpost of law and order on the Santa Fe Trail, and for anyone travelling west, it was one of the last reminders of civilization before heading out onto the open plains. Shortly following its creation, it primarily held both military and civilian prisoners during the American Civil War. In 1863, the jail became a residence for many women and children who were accused of harbouring guerrilla forces from the Missouri region. Each cell was 6 by 9 feet in diameter and was designed to house up to 3 prisoners, but during wartime it is said that each one was used to hold around 20 prisoners. Following the end of the war, it reverted back to its original intention, housing prisoners from all walks of life. Most notably, in 1880, Frank James, brother to the infamous outlaw Jesse James. The forefront of the structure was home to Marshal Jim Knowles and his family. The Marshal's wife was known to make warm meals for the inmates, using a small kitchen which was located to the rear of the house, mainly the child prisoners. During its time, it homed thousands upon thousands of inmates. Most of the occupants were imprisoned due to common crimes, such as openly using firearms in town, disturbing the peace, horse racing through the streets, or operating illegal gaming houses. Many of the prisoners would perish during their time in the jail, primarily due to its poor living conditions. It served as a holding until 1933, when it was decommissioned to be used for another purpose. In 1970, it was to become listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and more recently, its original form was to be restored for sightseeing. Reports tell that visitors have experienced paranormal activities upon entering the residence, mainly the celled area, even stating eerie feelings as they crossed the very first cell. There have been sounds of footsteps, growls, and even the voices of children are said to be heard. Many people have reported seeing apparitions, this time consisting of former women and children who were housed there during the Civil War. Other mysterious things have been experienced, such as items being moved from place to place, and radios both turning off and on, and the volume being adjusted, seemingly by itself. In this first cell we spoke of, many have mentioned a man dressed all in blue, just standing there. People believe this to be the spirit of Marshal Jim Knowles, who perished during the time of war when he was attempting to settle a fight between 2 inmates who were arguing over their opposing views of the war. Others believe that the man in blue is the spirit of a deputy marshal who in 1866 was slain during a prison break. But whether it be either the former lawmen or the spirits of the women and children who were held captive there, something is definitely causing an uneasy feeling to this place.